Okay, so zone of interest. The good thing is this time it doesn't start with us walking in the snow and the hiking.
Yes.
Did you watch our last one or listen to it?
No, I just kind of skipped ahead through it. I
Yeah,
mean, listening to myself for 40 minutes.
yeah.
Maybe not.
The editing technology on this, by the way, is fantastic. I cut out all the uhs, at least for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, Marie said it transcribes as well.
Yeah.
That's
When
pretty
I
cool.
walked into the house, it was uploading to the cloud, and when I sat down at this computer, I looked and it had it entirely written out.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
And then
Is
and
that
then
an
yeah,
Android thing?
and then I could it's a Google thing.
Oh,
So then I could like highlight this and delete it, and it would find it on this and delete it on that, and that's how I edited it.
wow.
I know.
That'd be
I
really
was like,
fast.
it entirely next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of next level, Zone of
Yeah.
Interest is kind of some next level filmmaking. Like it's very artistic. Like the
Yeah.
kind of it's it's weird because it was like nothing happens that like you said about
Yeah.
Shane Gillis, but it was accessible to me. Like I was always interested.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely always interesting, and it's not like, oh, it was boring, and then pow, something happens to keep your interest. It was
Mm.
just like you're just kind of coasting. It's you're just coasting at like a 4 out of 10 speed, 5 out of 10 speed,
Mm-hmm.
and it just has like little mounds along the way. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I think I'm trying to separate. I don't know if it's like my I want to say bias, but it's like bias because like I know they're Nazis, so does it just add the weight because they're a Nazi?
I was
You
thinking
know,
the same, yeah.
because like what if it was like,
Because we know they're like horrible things that every single thing they do,
yeah,
at least, is horrible.
like they're not allowed to have fun, they're not allowed to like enjoy themselves because they're Nazis. But it's like here
in
they
your
are
mind.
in your mind, right? But it's like here they are growing flowers and enjoying flowers, like we were saying. Like you can't. It's like they're not allowed to enjoy flowers because they're so delicate and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like no, you're a Nazi, you don't get that. But
And
like they're also human, right? So
and yet the
yeah.
flowers, as we discussed, did end up growing. Like we
Yeah,
saw
she
them
was
on.
saying, "Oh, 3 years ago, this was grass or whatever." So
Mhm.
she's like, obviously showing off to her friend that they've prospered,
So
right?
is that shallow? You know.
Was what shallow?
Well, to me, it's a comment on like the shallow nature of it. Like we were discussing, does the dog die.com or whatever
Yeah,
and stuff like that, of like these little ridiculous things that people look for as like symbols of moral judgment on the film. Like, oh, if the dog survives, then it's like, oh, I can watch the movie or I can't watch. And it's like people, this one filmer talked about like, a horrible thing happens to a man in a movie, nobody bats an eye, and then the dog dies, and everybody in the audience like recoiled, and it's
right.
like the guy just like was annihilated.
Yeah, it was murdered. Yeah,
But they reacted to the animal, so it's kind of like with the whole garden thing. It's like how people are focused on all the wrong things as like status symbols of like beauty and that kind
yeah,
of thing. Like that's really the only thing that the character cared about was her garden,
yeah.
and probably her children, of course.
Sure. I don't know. Like I don't want to say that. Like the movie definitely didn't shove anything down your throat. Just kind of like, oh yeah, they're humans too, and it's just like, yeah, like good luck trying to humanize a Nazi, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like it definitely I feel it's like the only movie I've ever seen of that perspective. Not that you've never seen from the Nazis' perspective before, but it was strange in the sense that like this is a Nazi's perspective of a regular guy who's just like a commander, and he goes to work like we see him go to work, right? He jumps on the horse and he goes into the concentration camp,
Yeah.
and then he goes home.
And you actually never see him out.
You never
like,
see a Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never see a Jew. But like all the stuff is always going on. It's always in the background, right? Like they're sleeping in bed and like the warm glow from the flaming chimney, a few yards away, like keeps them up because they're looking out the window and stuff. Like
They have to close their windows.
The windows because of the smell. So like
smell the roses.
yeah, to like smell the roses so that you can't, so your brain overlooks the ashes. I don't know, but like it was weird because it's like I've never seen a movie like that from that perspective, and I'm not gonna say like, oh yeah, like I guess Nazis were humans too. Like obviously they were, but like this doesn't make me feel better for Nazis. It's like, oh, I guess maybe they weren't so bad. No, it's nothing like that. It's just kind of like this is the other side that like for them this was just their life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the husband, the main
Yeah.
character, like he's kind of climbing the ladder, I
Yeah.
suppose,
Yeah.
right? So it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess it's just a job for them.
Did
You know,
he?
like
Did I mean? Why do you think that that was like such a sticking point? Do you think it was to show that like these couple fight over the same things regular couples fight about? It's like, oh well, I got this promotion, but it's
I gotta move
while
away.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and it's like, well, you don't need to do this and that. Like, do you think that's why, or do you think it was like saying something bigger about like anything,
I think I,
or do you think the
I this might sound choppy in saying. I think the movie definitely humanizes Nazis, but not through empathy.
yeah,
Like it doesn't make you want to feel bad for Nazis, or it's not
yeah,
trying to make you feel bad for
yeah,
Nazis, but like definitely it humanized them in the most human way. Like their lives are kind of mundane.
yeah,
Like it's the guy's birthday. They get him a kayak, and it's like,
yeah,
oh, this is nice. Thank you for my birthday
mm-hmm.
present, whatever. And then like a little bit later on in the movie, he's fishing,
Yeah,
big deal,
yeah,
right? And they're growing the garden, big deal. Like they kind of have a mundane life.
mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, like one of the most awful things in human history,
Yeah.
in recent human history, is going on the other side of the yard.
Yeah.
On the other side of the fence. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it's weird because it's not like And then he has like some regular Nazi conversations on the phone, like it's just like, oh, we're gonna do this, and there's the salesman for the chimneys and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, if we do these things, like we can be much more efficient, and it's like
Mhm.
this is like the worst thing, but again, it's so mundane,
Well,
right?
that's the thing that I was constantly wondering about, and it might seem ridiculous, was just like, is there gonna be a moment where somebody says, "Oh my gosh, the horror!" Like
Yeah,
when the chemicals, the ashes swim down the
yeah.
river.
When he's fishing, you see the cloud of
Yeah,
ashes or whatever creeping up behind him. Yeah,
yeah, and it disturbs their existing way of life,
yeah.
and they gotta watch it.
Yep,
It's
get out
like,
of the water. Get out of the water.
and
Yeah.
it's such a hugely inconvenient place. Somebody says, "Oh my God, this has to stop. We got to move." Like that doesn't
Yeah.
happen, and it's just I was wondering,
I
like,
could put up with it until this one point. Yeah.
yeah. So I was wondering, like, do we today feel that way because this has happened? To think that, oh, of course we would have to do something, or we couldn't ignore it, or like something would have to happen. Do we think of that because the Holocaust happened, or is that like an innate human thing that maybe some people have and some people don't? Like, I mean, it was funny because what I was talking about, like, oh, imagine if you made a TikTok of like what celebrities would fit in the Nazi Germany today,
Right.
of like, because it humanizes them so much, of like, you can see how like these people are, at least the way that they're drawn in the movie, shallow, like one-dimensional. They
Yeah.
want the simple things.
Well,
And
the wife treats the I think she's Jewish. She might not be the maid really poorly. Remember, like she doesn't like take the empty plate away from the breakfast table, and she's just like, yeah, my husband can. Spread your ashes across whatever. Basically, like smarten up, or like you know what's gonna happen to you. And it was like, oh, that was weird.
And I've heard
know,
people,
like-
and the sad thing is, I've heard people talk about like maids in that way today, not directly. Like I haven't seen that, but I've heard people
Subhuman. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, and like caste systems in other countries, and,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So it's like,
It's like right. My point is like she's kind of like a regular person, mundane. They're kind of bickering, and then this like just like little glint of like terrible awfulness to this maid of like
Yeah.
I'm gonna spread your ashes if you don't like clear the breakfast table when
Yeah.
before I sit down. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like weird.
it's weird because they're monsters. Did it like live? Like, what expectations did you have going into it?
Honestly, like I said, all I knew was the premise.
Yeah.
Like when I was saying to Rachel, just because she said, "What's it about?" I was just like, "Yeah, it's this family that lives like next door to a concentration camp." She asked me, she was just like, "What happens?" And I said, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the things that could happen. And she said, that sounds really boring. And I'm like, I get it, but also, like, I want to know.
Yeah,
Because she
yeah.
also said a similar thing about the Banshees of Inisherin. Because it was just kind of like, what's it about? And I was just like, well, it's about this, these two friends that were friends for a long time. And the one friend doesn't want to be his friend anymore. He's like, okay, what happens? And I
Yeah.
said, that's it. She was just like, how is that a movie? And I
Yeah.
was just like, but I want to know how he gets away from it. Like what happens. Like it's such a
And
simple
did you
thing.
like Banshees?
I did.
Yeah.
I did like it. The ending seemed, from what I remember about the ending, I don't
The
know if it
death of a
seemed,
friendship, you know.
yeah, the depth of the friendship, but like, did it seem petty? It's just like, maybe did he take it too far? Because like, doesn't he burn down the house or something?
Yeah,
Yeah, so like,
and the dog, yeah,
I just,
or the Jenny the donkey had Colin Farrell's donkey. Spoiler alert.
yeah,
Yeah, but
it was a while like since I've seen it, but yeah, I remember the ending being like a little bit petty, but also just kind of like, because it's like if it doesn't go the natural way that you would think, where it's just like, okay, I guess we're just not friends anymore, and they
mhm.
go off their separate ways and find new friends. It's just like, well, if the one friend doesn't want this to happen, how far is he willing to go? You
Yeah,
know, like,
to me that movie in many ways echoes this and like parallels it, but is also the opposite because when I watched Banshees of Inisherin, I thought that it was very like telling of the times that we live in.
now,
Yeah, of
but the
just
movie's set in like,
exactly 100 years
yeah,
ago.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it was just kind of like the civil unrest that's happening now in the United States and like January 6th of like red states versus blue states and like people fighting with each other. That's at least the way that I saw it of like people are so politically polarized.
That seems like a reason. What was political about that? Like, he just didn't want to be his friends anymore, his Colin Farrell's friend anymore, because like
Hmm.
he just kind of was just like, yeah, you're boring. Like,
But at the
I've been
same
friends with
time,
you
the
so long.
Irish Civil War is literally going on in the background. Like,
Yeah, we know that because of context, but I don't think they reference that at all in the movie.
well, they reference it in the letters of Colin Farrell to the like to his sister or his sister to
Do
him,
they?
don't they?
Okay, all right. Maybe you remember it better
Anyway,
than me. I didn't.
but
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have grabbed that.
anyways, but I was just like set in a time of war that's exactly 100 years ago. Made me think about like as I was watching it of like just how upset with people we are today, like how
Oh
politically
yeah,
polarized we are
people
today.
are inconveniences, not other
Hmm.
people.
But I found because that writer is so gifted like lyrically,
Which writer?
Michael McDonough.
Who
Um,
did Banshees?
yes,
Okay,
and he
okay,
also did Three Billboards, which I like
right.
better, and a lot of people don't like. But I found that that movie was very maybe because it's Irish lyrical, like,
Okay,
and that writer is Irish and is accused of not being Irish and
like
pretending to be.
lyrical, how like a verse and then
Like
a verse and a chorus.
yeah, it's very like it's all about the writing and the dialogue. Like the
Okay,
dialogue is super important to that movie. The Zone of Interest I found the complete opposite, where it was all direction. It was all like, well, it was visual and oral, um, but it wasn't. There was so little that was spoken.
and
Where
what was spoken was
just
minor.
yeah, things that you
Yeah,
absolutely like had to know to get context that couldn't be said visually, but so much
sure.
is seen visually. Whereas I found like Banshees to be like spoken lyrically, like very beautiful, like 70% being told in a way like very beautifully
Sure.
and in a very smart way, and this very equally being shown, you know.
Okay.
So I thought it was like I guess more effective. Like it was kind of like, and I don't know how to like criticize it, but it's very in an art house typical way. This is how you should inside the lines do a movie, like show, don't tell,
Mm,
have something to say, but create a believable world, populate it
mm.
with characters with everyday lives, but show, don't tell, and
But
everything like
yeah,
the sound and the visual is like so important to this movie and done in a way like
because they decided it was important.
yeah, and me saying to you like, okay, I know something hasn't happened, but I'm like kind of riveted by this
Mm.
movie in a weird way because it like it visually it looks so neat.
Yeah, like when he is fishing, like it is a long still shot, and you're kind of just like, is something gonna happen? Like you're kind of
Yeah.
waiting for something to happen, and then you see the cloudy water,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it, you might not realize that it's something until it gets close to him. It's just like, yeah, something is getting close to him, and then that's when the tension's rising. It's just like, oh, get out of the water, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know, like again, like a slow violin, I suppose.
Well, I said to you at the and it wasn't until literally the end of the movie, and I'm trying to find it here if I can. But the I said, has the camera moved at all?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
that was a good
didn't
point.
notice.
And since you when you mentioned it halfway through, I was like, I think you're right. I don't think it has. But also like now I'm looking for it, and then since you mentioned it, I never noticed it move.
at all.
after that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I hadn't thought about it until you said it, and then and then I didn't notice it after the fact.
Yeah,
So
I'm pretty,
everything was a still shot.
yeah, and that is like camera movement so good that you do not notice. Like it is so everything is so perfectly placed. I
Hmm.
guess. Uh,
Yeah, I don't want to use. I don't want to say that like each shot was thorough, but like every shot was like um prepared, or
yes.
it seemed like every shot was deliberate.
Yes.
You know, like
Mm-hmm.
there was no wasted shots, or there
Mm-hmm.
was no like filler shots. Like everything was necessary. Everything was uh strategized, that we need this, then this, then this. You know, like very specific.
Did that work in any way against the movie where you're kind of like, okay, this is too prepared or too neat? Or do you think
I want to say, I would say no, just because it was consistent the entire movie. Because
yes?
like if it was like, you know, the first half, or it's just like, oh, and then things got crazy and the camera got a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
wonky to like whatever. It's just like, okay, it was, this was one part of the movie, this was the other, but the entire movie is the same way. So to say like take
Yeah.
away, then you'd be taking away from the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know it's not like the perfect metaphor, but it like reminds me of like one of the few games I 100%ed was Assassin's Creed,
The
and
first
like
one,
the second one actually, and I went through and like collected
is
all
that
the
one Italy?
feathers. What?
Is that one Italy?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the Renaissance, and they should do. Everybody said they should do one in World War II, but they haven't yet.
Hmm.
I think they like older history and stuff.
It's
And
like the 40s.
yeah, and Ubisoft is so like anti-controversial. They're like boring. Like they made a movie. They made Watch Dogs and like went out of their way not to comment on like surveillance. Same way Call of Duty like
Oh.
goes out of its way and like makes up a country for like a global conflict that we all know is like either way too absurd to make any sense or something. I
It's
wish.
just like, or just plug in conflict country here.
Yeah, and then it annoyed me because it was like Medal of Honor one year during its reboot. I'm not sure if you ever played it. In 2010 they did Afghanistan is the plot of Medal of Honor 2010, and the Taliban was originally like the opposing force in
Yeah.
multiplayer, and people like threw a hissy fit that that the Taliban were the bad guys that you could play as in multiplayer,
But
which
they are though.
well, they changed the name of them to the like opposing force because people complained.
But why would they be complaining about like this?
Because it's like these are real bad guys that killed
in real
actual
life.
that killed actual people, as if as if playing as the Russians in like World at War or whatever.
Was
Or
okay.
or the Germans or whatever, or using German machinery. Yeah, it's hypocritical.
That's weird.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, we're making commerce, not art. They ended up changing it.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I forget what my original point really was, but I guess what I'd like to say is how kind of unflinching this movie is, and it's wanting to confront, but without being in your face about it. Like it. People,
Yeah. At no point was that any of the part of that movie in your face.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, I was saying about how.
I would say that maybe the only thing was at the end, showing the women cleaning the the museum, the well, I don't know if it was Auschwitz, but like the
I presume so.
Concentration camp museum, which I've never been to or anything, but I have heard is extremely humbling.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing them cleaning the glass and then vacuuming or whatever, like it
Much
wasn't
in the same way that they kind of did throughout the movie.
Yeah, like they kept it to the same still shots, like all those things, but like not that it was in your face, but it definitely took a break, like you took a break from the movie to see this thing, and it's like, oh yeah, this is how this ends. You know what I mean? Because like,
yeah, because I believe that must be the only time in the movie you see inside of the concentration camp, considering you're in the zone of interest.
If you look at it that way, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, because they never in the movie they never go inside the camp except. Well, you can infer maybe the one part
Where it's
with the husband, it's just his face, but
Yeah.
he's surrounded with smoke, and you hear the screams or whatever. But like, you never see anything inside whatsoever. But yeah, I guess that's right. That's the only time that you see it is like present day.
I guess it's above reproach, sort of in that way that I didn't think when it cut to the main day, which has kind of become a thing in movies. Spike Lee has done it in a few of his movies. They cut to present day to show like civil unrest to make the point. I didn't think it was like
Well,
powerful enough.
what about Scorsese for the
Killers of the Flower
Killers
Moon.
of the Flower Moon when he
Yeah.
like was just like, all right, now it's this year and
Yeah, it's
and this is what happened.
to me, it's like an admission of the limitations of its director in a way
For him to do it.
to
Or
me
just,
that represents sort of like a failure of imagination. Like that was something that Steven Spielberg did because he didn't know how to end Schindler's List, where he's like, okay, well, we'll cut to Schindler's gravestone in real life and we'll see the descendants of the people he saved, and that's when it will be in color. And it like worked then, and I feel since, even though this didn't feel connected to that at all, even though we invoked like Schindler's List during watching this movie, that it felt like obviously it's trying to make like another point of like this is the remains of what you saw. That I thought that it was kind of I thought it was kind of weak. It's like I've seen the piles of shoes before. So it's kind of weird to talk about this in movie terms when it's so rooted in historicism, you know?
yeah, I mean,
kind of insulates itself
as I'm
against
thinking about it
criticism.
now, it makes me think like, you know, because he's the husband's walking down the stairs and goes to throw up or whatever, and then it cuts away. It's the women cleaning the windows, vacuuming the thing, and like I feel like thinking about it now, like part of me subconsciously is like wanting to know what happens to him. Like they did
Yeah.
obviously garner some interest in the family, like they're the main characters, and there's like a little bit of a struggle because he's gonna like move and then he's going back, whatever. But like part of me is like wondering like what's gonna happen to these people, and then right near the very end, it gives you that reminder of just like it doesn't matter what happens in the end. This is what happens in the end. Remember, and then it's the shots of the museum, and you're just like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. This is in fact how it ends.
So
We already know how this ends.
Yeah.
Right.
Haas was hanged in 1947 following a trial before the Polish Supreme National Tribunal. During his imprisonment, at the request of the Polish authorities, Haas wrote his memoirs, released in English under the title Commandant of Auschwitz, the autobiography of Rudolf Haas.
So he was a real guy.
Yes.
But the Zone of Interest makes no mention that it is a real guy. It's not like inspired by a true story. Like,
Yeah.
I never said anything like that.
Yeah,
Like, if you never said that was a real person, I would have had no idea.
Yeah, you could have believed it as like
A fictional character, yeah.
Yeah. But a believable fictional character.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's like one of the things of like, because it's World War II, it would be like, it is something that you believe that somebody would like. What if there was somebody who lived beside Auschwitz the whole time, and what would their life be
What would
like?
that be like? Yeah.
Yeah, so in that way it like marries it. So like I just figured, because everything about the movie was so exacting, that I'm like, you know what?
very
I bet you
German.
this is a real person.
I wonder now. So he wrote an autobiography. I wonder if the director or the writer or anybody makes reference to the book, saying like, "Yeah, I was inspired to, write something after reading this book, his autobiography." Right.
So
'Cause like I said, it makes no mention of
Yeah.
it being a real guy. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know unless you said something.
well, it's interesting because it's like the movie is so vague and specific at the same time. Like it straddles such a line.
Yeah.
That I found fascinating. Like earlier, now I remember I was talking about like when you 100% like an open world video game and there's like nothing to see here. If you think about like all the Holocaust movies that we've seen, how many of them have been made, and we've kind of seen it all.
Yeah.
That like, of course, the
This
last
was a different perspective.
yeah, that they found something new, and the final way is like just seeing it for how regular it
Right.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, for every spontaneous movie like Fury or Saving Private Ryan,
Yeah.
there's this one in between where
Yeah.
nothing happens.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah. And
until the next time something does happen.
yeah, and it's so funny because it's like it kind of, I don't want to say it like somebody once said on a trailer for a Bong Joon-ho movie that like this movie is so good you'll be wondering why you haven't seen movies this good your whole life. And I just kind of thought about the care that was poured into each shot. I mean, obviously, this probably took like year and a half, 2 years of work. Who knows? Probably years of research.
What, Zone of Interest?
Yeah. That I was wondering, like, I talked about seeing indie movies and that begin with nothing. And I'm
Right.
already bored by minute 2. And then it's like, what makes this movie so different? And it felt
Well,
like
you did
so,
say that the music they put
yeah,
obviously like an insane amount of effort
Michael
in the
Levy.
music. Yeah, in the music and the audio, and I mean like, well, like how long did it take for it to fade to black before the movie started
Yeah.
with the
Hmm.
orchestra
Hmm.
ness?
It
You know,
really,
like
like, in the museum piece at the end kind of brings it, like, I joked about it, but, like, you're now entering the zone of interest. Like, it really is in a way to, like,
mm,
get you forget, not that, coming in or finding your parking or sitting down or walking in the house or
mm-hmm,
turning on the TV. It's
mm-hmm,
enough to be, like, kind of annoyed to the fact that you're paying attention. Like, you're paying attention, like, okay, is something going to happen in the, and that's how it got your attention. That's
mm-hmm.
how it brought you into the world, just like a long, slow, like,
Violin, yeah,
yeah, like almost like a museum ride to bring you, like, you're sitting on a coaster the whole time, like,
mm.
that ride in Jurassic Park at the
Oh,
beginning when
sure,
they're sitting on that thing and they're like kind of on
on the
a,
track,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly, that's how it felt like we were being pulled through history there.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I know that sounds like I'm trying to be like some kind of film scholar. I'm not.
no,
But
no,
yeah.
but yeah, it did.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think that's a neat way of putting it in terms of like, yeah, they were able to find something new with
Hmm.
this movie. Like again, for all the action-packed,
Yeah.
crazy World
Hmm.
War II movies,
Yeah.
this movie is what happens in between those movies.
Yeah, Masters
Yeah,
of the Air is on right now, and that's bombastic in parts, and
yeah,
like it's weird because it, like, we've seen, our culture, at least how I was raised, obviously how you were raised because we went to the same school, like, is so over educates us on World War II,
yeah.
essentially. And it's kind of funny because it's like, well, I've seen everything.
Mm,
How could this be different? It's, and to your point earlier, it says, uh, the book of the book this movie was based on, by Martin and me, did not specifically name Haas, but Glazer, the director,
mm-hmm.
framed it around him and his wife in the adaptation. So in the book, I thought it was about the commandant, but it tells the story of a Nazi officer, who has become enamored with the camp commandant's wife. So it has 3 narrators. So it doesn't have really any of the same characters. It's just like the general synopsis and time period it uses as a jumping off point. And I imagine, like, the way it tells its story in sort of a mundane way, I would imagine,
Mm.
it's kind of fascinating. I'd probably read it. Oh, and what's interesting is that I thought that it would be like similar to Poor Things, where it's like, oh, this is a book from the 90s, or like American
Mm-hmm.
Fiction. It's like, well, this book is in 2003, but this book was made in like 2014.
Oh
Yeah,
wow,
yeah, and it's like,
10 years ago.
yeah, and it's like, I wonder, because it's like, when was Oppenheimer, the book made? I wonder, because it's like, that's another one where, American Prometheus, where I forget. Yeah, it's so 2005. So,
Mm.
like, actually nearly close to 20 years ago, but also kind of new,
Hmm.
because it's like, you tend to think of movies, even, or books even from the 90s now, as being like storied in a way that
Mm.
they had time to collect dust and somebody could dust them off. But
Somebody could remember them.
yeah, so I guess, I mean, this is more of a cultural question to finish off. First, I'll say, like, out of 10, how would you rate it? Because this is a tough film to rate.
It is a tough film to rate, but I would almost say, like we were saying earlier, that I would put it. I don't know if I could give it a number because it could be all over the place,
Yeah,
but I would put it. If it was in DVD format, I would put it on the shelf right next to Drive My Car.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
like Drive My Car better, like, just
I think
because.
so. Yeah,
But
me too.
this movie deliberately, like, puts you at a distance. I'm putting together my list now because I've now seen every single Best Picture movie.
This
Uh,
was your last one.
yes, this is the spot for a zone of interest that I'm gonna add right now. Um, and I'm gonna place it. The other thing that people have said, and it's impartially based on its release strategy. I mean, obviously above Maestro, obviously above Killers,
Yeah,
obviously above Poor Things. To me, obviously above Past Lives. I'm
I
not
don't think
sure.
I saw Past
Okay,
Lives.
above Oppenheimer.
I man,
Now here's the
three and
thing.
a half hours. This is half the direct
3 hours. Yeah, and it
Sorry,
accomplishes
sorry.
basically the same thing of like war is bad.
Oh, I didn't see American Fiction. I want to see American Fiction.
Yeah, that will come to Amazon Prime at some time because it's owned by MGM. It's funny to me because I could have seen Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall. I did see The Holdovers and I did see American Fiction.
You put Holdovers above Anatomy of a Fall?
Yes, they were all. They all played at Toronto International Film Festival.
And did you see them?
I knew Anatomy of a Fall because it's like these two premiered at the French Film Festival in May, Cannes, where Killers of the Flower Moon also premiered, and Anatomy of a Fall won the top prize, and Zone of Interest won the director's prize. They were both like hot topics going in, so I knew they were like gonna be the Oscar films. I did not know that I would personally like them as much as I did. You know what I mean? Because it's this kind of thing of a combination of my tastes maturing, the world and culture's taste maturing, and the advancement of filmmaking in general.
Is that all the nominees? Is 10 nominees?
So you've never heard this song?
I don't think so. No, I've never.
Really?
No.
Yeah, I listened to the radio more than you, I guess, when I was a kid. Anyway, that was the first music video that director made, and it was like, you can see later on that he's like climbing on the walls and stuff, and that was because they were like too cheap or like they didn't have the money to like actually do it Inception style, so they just had a portable set that they moved along the ground. And that's how. So
it was like Batman style.
Yeah, legitimately. Yeah. So, anyways, out of 10, I guess for me, to me, it exists in a fascinating space where the ranking doesn't matter. If somebody told me it was 0 out of 10, that's valid. Somebody told me it was a 10 out of 10, that was valid. 7, 6, it's valid.
It's valid like all over the scale.
Yeah, except things. Weirdly. Except an 8 or like
a 9,
an 8 or like a 3. You know, nobody ever or yeah.
Because it's just kind of like if it got like an 8 or a 9, it's just like okay, what was it missing? Yeah. Well, nothing. But it's just like okay, so why not give it a 10? You know, like. Yeah. The annoying... It's like, but something wasn't there, so it's like, okay, then give it a 5.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So this is, like, of course, the last movie that I've seen out of all the Best Picture nominees, and somebody said, I can imagine this movie winning Best Picture, which, like, to me, it's like the idea.
I can see that it's definitely a contender.
I can see it's weirdly one of those movies where it's like, if you hadn't seen it, I can picture somebody, like, voting for it, thinking it would be that good. It doesn't, it didn't. I was expecting it to quietly blow me away, I guess. I wasn't disappointed in it, but it was, like,
It's almost hard to criticize.
I needed a revelation of some sort, even if it was internal.
You know what I was thinking at some point? I was wondering if in the middle or at the end, if, like, some Jew was gonna, like, break free or, like, somehow get out and
disturb
their way of life. Yeah, whether, like, you know, the kid's playing with a ball in the front yard and then all of a sudden, like, starts yelling or something, and then they look out and there's, like, some, you know, prisoner Jew, like, freaking out or something like that because he escaped, and then, like, you know, witnessing a murder on the front lawn. I was like, okay, like, I wonder if that was going to happen, but no, it did not.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, as Haas leaves his Berlin office descending a stairway, he stops and retches repeatedly, but is unable to vomit. He stares into darkness.
Okay, so he didn't. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
He stares into the darkness to see if he's being watched, you know? And that's why it was like, you saw sort of like the people and you see like the blackness. And I was thinking about that, like, because you're like, did he vomit?
Yeah, I did say, I was just like, is he trying to, or is he trying to hold himself back? But then, like, again, it's like a movie where you have to look all over the screen for the details, and yes, it was the long, dark corridor hallway, and I'm looking down the hallway to see if there's anything there, but, like, there wasn't, maybe, you know?
Yeah,
and then,
But it's kind of, and it's so funny how I can, like, freely talk, like, this is, like, a big brain movie, where it's, like, I can legitimately talk about, Like it's so accessible, weirdly. Like for a movie about nothing, like it's him talking about wondering if he's being watched. It's like he is being watched by us, by history, and he knows that he's being historic.
I hadn't thought
So
of it like that. Yeah,
so
we're the ones watching him.
yeah, yeah, and it's not like judging him or
Mm.
whatever, but it's like he knows he's being judged, you know, like for what he's for
Maybe in
what
the
he's done.
ethos.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even though throughout the entire movie he doesn't.
show it.
No, that like security cameras haven't been invented. You
Yeah.
know, it's
He locks all the doors and stuff. You
yeah,
see him like close the lights, lock the doors
yeah,
in the night, in the evenings.
yeah. It's total isolation. So it's
Yeah.
like it's a movie that like totally sits with you. It's 105 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. Like
Oh
when
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Oh, that's right. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I would say out of 10 for me, I'd have to, and it's beyond that, but I'd like give it a 7, like a perfect 7, if that makes any sense.
No less than a 7.
Like I could say 7.5, but I don't want because I don't enjoy enough. I would. It's weird because I'd watch it again.
Yeah,
Like I'd
because
watch
you
it,
loved it so much. Nah, not so much.
but it's like it. Inception was the same way. I didn't like it, but I knew there was more there to be like discovered. It's like kind of like a puzzle for people to unlock. Like it's so exists on its own terms. It's like to be admired that way. It just annoys me. I wish I could put it higher than Oppenheimer, just because I
I
didn't
would say that that's like
like
an
Oppenheimer.
interesting. I would align with a lot of that stuff on the list. Obviously, the movies I haven't seen, but
Mhm.
I feel like I'd want to put it above
Barbie.
Oppenheimer. I like Barbie, but
That's
like
the annoying thing is that I like.
I enjoyed it, and
Well,
and that has value.
yeah.
But like, I feel like I'd want to put it above Oppenheimer because, like, man, Oppenheimer was a bit of a drag
Yeah,
for some of
two
it.
2 hours and then an hour afterwards to be like
So much of that movie was like a jog. Like you jogged through that entire movie.
yeah, like, and the other thing about Oppenheimer too is like, okay, the entire third act of the movie hinges upon Oppenheimer's reputation being ruined, and it's like, well, obviously his reputation didn't get ruined because we're watching a movie about him now. So it's kind of like, why do we need to spend so much time doing this? And it was just kind of like where the impact of the statement kind of failed, like very purposefully in the middle. There's like the show stopping pins and needles bomb drop, which is absolutely riveting. And any
With Josh Peck.
for movies that I like, yeah. Josh, where did you put the detonator? Oh no, gave it to Drake. You know,
Call Oprah.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, it felt more technically assured than Oppenheimer. I know people will find that like blasphemy because Oppenheimer is such a technically whatever
Sure.
thing. But I thought like Oppenheimer was like much more ambitious, but it kind of like it also weirdly typical in some ways, and I'm not gonna justify it right now.
I would definitely say that like Zone of Interest.
I can't believe I have American Fiction third. That actually surprises me.
It's your list.
Well, it's weird because like this is the only list I have on my Letterboxd at Film Gamer. If you want to follow me,
They're already listening.
yeah. Oh, I don't have it as watched. Do I? Oh yeah, I didn't rate it on Letterboxd. That's why. Now we're at 100 because I just added Zone of Interest. But this is the only list where I didn't choose the entries. The Academy did, right? So you know, if you go to my actual top 10 movies of the year, these number 4 and 5, which are Barbie and Oppenheimer respectively, were like 24 and 25 of my favorite movies of the year, and like bumped off because I gave Barbie a 6.8 and Oppenheimer a 6.6 because I like 2/3 of it in the final third. It sucks. So it's what's fascinating to me is that I understand all of these movies being here. They're all technically very good movies. The least technical movie is American Fiction because that's just essentially like a movie built on a screenplay and kind of nothing else. That was adapted from a book, but it's very clever. And then the one that's like, to me, overall, like pure enjoyment is The Holdovers. I know you don't necessarily like it.
I liked it.
Yeah. But every one of those movies represent excellence. To me, it's just like the most stale and uninspired is Maestro, so that's 10. 9, it's like even a bit more ambitious. But again, it's like they're not telling the correct story in Killers of the Flower Moon. Like I want them to do a basic procedural that either, I feel that was something that a Leonardo
They
DiCaprio
should have
movie,
given Jesse Plemons.
and that's how it's written in the
Well,
book. And they're
yeah,
like, oh, well, we want to be respectful to the Osage. It's like, okay, well, if you
but
like,
that's not the book
but if you
completely.
wanted to be respectful to the Osage, then like hire somebody who can tell that story, not Martin Scorsese,
Yeah.
and Leonardo DiCaprio said halfway through, well, I think I got to play Ernest then, because he was going to play the Jesse Plemons character. And then it's like, oh, well,
I
aren't
got to be
you?
the star.
Well, that's the thing, is like it's presented as some kind of like grand of Leo to change the story, to have the Osage more in the conversation, while at the same time not moving out of the way of the story, because it
Right.
focuses adamantly on his character, who does not like everything to be explained about Leo's characters in 5 minutes. And it's so funny because he's kind of make him out to be more of a complicated character than the commandant in this, who's like a very simple character.
Mm-hmm.
But I still was like interested to spend time in about him and learn about him. Like when he says at the end, like, "Oh, I was thinking about a way how do I could gas everybody in the room." It's kind of like, he's a total monster, you know. And what people said on Twitter about like Hedwig, the wife character, like that she's a monster, and I'm kind of like, is she? I guess because
Yeah.
like she's talking about like, I want to live here where we have our garden and stuff, and you're just
Yeah.
thinking like you cannot see the horror. It's I know, not to grass at like big questions and stuff. I'm not sure how far we are into it. Oh shoot, we're 42 minutes, so I'll just like wrap it up saying like,
Well, I want to say that
yeah.
like definitely the movie made me think about like, again, I don't want to say humanizing Nazis, but like it humanized those characters who were Nazis, and it definitely made me think about how people how the German people could have gotten there, and that's why I think history is important. Which I think that movie would play a good role in, like, really rounding out the history, I guess, of World War II. Again, in between the action-packed movies, and I just say that because
Yeah.
you were saying about in high school World War II, whatever, like World War One.
I remember that was like 20%.
Yeah,
At
it was
least
a huge
of it.
portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like definitely like people overlook World War One and like obviously how bad it was, but like when you kind of like understand even like a simple basic level of how it could have gotten there was, World War One, the Germans, like, they lost their air force, their army or whatever, and they were like humiliated on like,
Yeah.
a global scale, massive inflation with like all these things, and then Adolf Hitler, being as a good speaker that he is, like, you think every time that you see a video of Adolf Hitler, he's like saying awful things about the Jews, but like that's not always the case. That he's just kind of like, no, like, I will bring the German people back
Yeah,
to
it's just
where,
propaganda.
yeah, it's propaganda stuff, and people are just like, yeah, we've been disenfranchised for 20 years, right? Like, please, like, help us.
Yeah.
So then, like, when you kind of understand those things, like, not that it gives them a pass, but like the main character, like, who knows what he was doing 5-10 years prior. Like, they talk about how they came from nothing, right? Because the mom was just like, oh, look how well you've done for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, who knows, maybe they were like in terrible times and now they're doing much better, and it's just like, thank you, Adolf, for helping me.
Well,
right? Like, when you kind of put it like that, it's just like, oh, like, that's how, because it's not just one thing from one day to the next. It's always like a slow build, right?
Well, what I know historically, because we are, and it sounds cheap to say it now, like overeducated on World War II. I just mean in terms of history, we could have learned about like more
There's a lot
stuff.
of content there.
Like, I know nothing about like ancient history and stuff.
Yeah.
Even though I've taken like history of the modern Middle East, history and world history at separate times, and it's just kind of like it focuses on this because it's like a very simple good and evil story that this kind of muddies. In German context, that I know is that like Germany was still going through the Great Depression because of their catastrophic losses in World War One,
Right.
and
massive inflation, yeah.
and then all of a sudden you have like this speaker who comes up and is kind of like, well, here's all of your problems are valid. Here's what the real problem is. We have to do this, and this, and then get rid of the final solution, and that kind of thing. And World War II is what brought Germany and the United States like out of the Great Depression.
Sure. Sure.
because it kickstarted the economy and people
Sure.
were like fighting, and now it's like the economy only does well when the U.S. goes to war or
Yeah,
something like
it's
that.
awful.
Well, it's just it's a broken system, right?
Yeah, I don't know. My point in saying like understanding the history, I'm not obviously a super history major buff. Like
Neither
I
am
do
I.
like history, but my point in saying that is that you know Nazis can obviously get this label that they're the worst of the worst. They're inhuman and things like that. And it's kind of like, well, again, when you understand the history and you watch a movie like this, you can see
It happened.
how you get there,
Hmm.
right? Like it's not like 1 + 1 = 2, like this plus this equals Nazism, but
Hmm.
like again, just like breadcrumbs all along the way, and
Hmm.
we get something like that where people are just proud to be prospering, right? Like the
Yeah.
Nazis made Germany prosperous again, which is sure
Hmm.
like awful to say, but
Yeah.
it's a reality, right? Like they were in massive inflation. They started doing this stuff, and now these German people are proud because they have something, and it's like that's awful that it
Hmm.
could get to that. But
Yeah.
that movie does a good job of kind of revealing
Explain.
that, yeah, revealing that a little bit. That
Hmm.
it's just like they're people that just want to be proud,
Yeah.
right? Like of
Yeah.
their stuff, and
Without being blind to everything else.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
their whole identity.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think it
That's
will
all.
replace in classroom Schindler's List anytime soon? Because I remember having to watch Schindler's List in grade 11. I don't think
Yeah,
so.
I don't know.
Schindler's List is, it sounds
I had
weird
to
to say,
watch
but it's
I had to
entertaining.
watch Passchendaele too, so like
Oh, yeah. What? No,
what
wasn't that a field trip that we chose to go
no, I
to?
think I watched it in Coleman's class.
I could have sworn that I remember seeing it in theaters. Like we went to the theater. We
Maybe
went
your
to sit.
class. I remember I'm
Yeah.
almost certain I watched it in Coleman's class.
So yeah, and for us, it was we went to the Cineplex, and it was like a special showing though. It was this school, and
I
it's
don't
like I
know.
wonder if Paul Gross or the Canadian Film Board, because they spent so much money on it, like lobbied to have classes go to it, because sometimes like
Maybe.
when a religious movie comes out, like the church will sometimes like
Sure.
organize church groups and stuff to go there. But like in grade 11, my sister had to watch Schindler's List, and then so I watched it even though I was like 3 years younger in like
Yeah.
high school, and then I watched it again, and it's bizarrely like an I don't want to say entertaining film, but it's like an engaging film.
Mm.
So it's just kind of like I don't know, virtuoso. So
I would say that like
so it won't
eh,
replace Schindler's List, basically,
no,
or
but
The Pianist, which I didn't watch till much later. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as like Canadian funded films, give me more Blackberry.
yeah,
Justin Long.
yeah. This
Give me
movie
more Blackberry.
is made by the UK though, which is fascinating. The Zone of Interest.
Huh.
So yeah, it's nominated for 5 Academy Awards: Best International Feature Film, which it will probably win. Best Sound, which
But it's contending with Anatomy of a Fall.
no, Anatomy of a Fall was consciously by the French not nominated for international film.
But I thought you said they did the 51-49 French English
They
thing.
did, so it could qualify.
Yeah.
And the director of Anatomy of a Fall had some words to say about the Prime Minister, Emmanuel Macron, at the time. And it was partially seen that maybe politically, that they decided not to pick that movie as their movie for international film. Each country selects the movie that they want to represent their country.
So what did France pick over Anatomy of a Fall?
They picked a French movie called The Taste of Things, starring Juliette Binoche, which is actually like apparently really good and about like delicious food.
It's not a cop out. It's actually also a good movie.
That's from my understanding. It's not as heady. And the counter argument was that, of course, France was maybe if it didn't choose a movie that heavily criticized its court system, it was also never going to choose a movie that was 49% in English because of how the French are. And it also was never going to choose a movie where the lead is a German woman, so
they want French the whole way through.
And then the argument to make about France being good is that they recognize here's a movie that won the Palme d'Or at our most prestigious film festival, one of the most prestigious in the world. It doesn't need our help. Let's just nominate another movie. People will be more interested in The Taste of Things as well, and we can essentially promote 2 movies. And then, of course, Anatomy of a Fall ends up getting 5 Academy Award nominations, not international feature film. So this is
that's a good point. It doesn't need our help.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, The Taste of Things didn't even end up getting selected for Best International Feature Film. So The Zone of Interest is the most high-profile one in that category. That's a slam dunk. Best Sound it could win, but it will likely be part of an Oppenheimer sweep. Like
Uh,
this year, more than any other year, is like a year where it's like, yeah, Oppenheimer is likely going to be like a Lord of the Rings style,
just slam dunking everything.
bulldoze
Yeah.
everything. Best Picture, I don't think it would win. It would be something if it did win, and it would, I guess, be a fine winner, like because it fits, like it's a well done movie and better done than like Coda, which won Best Picture amazingly. But like but it won't win. Best Director, again, totally deserves to be there. Christopher Nolan is like undoubtedly gonna win there. It's like quote unquote his time.
He's
you know?
due.
Yeah.
Bunch of crap.
Yeah, I hate that because
Yeah.
it just creates like the famous one.
Turns.
Well, the famous one is with Leo not winning for like ever
For years and years, and then
because
he
he
gets it for the
didn't
Revenant.
deserve to win. Maybe
There was just a better movie that year.
yeah, or a better performance. Like, yeah, he could have won for Wolf of Wall Street, but he wasn't. There was never any year where I'm like, oh, far and away is amazing, because famously the first year where and his best performance is What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and that year he was nominated opposite Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, which is the type of like movie and character that never get nominated for Academy Awards, like an action movie. And Tommy Lee Jones is like also amazing in that movie. If you watch that movie again, like, hi, who's in charge? Rips off his back. Oh, gee whiz, look here, I love that. I watch that scene all the time. And then the other one that people say, because it's a World War II movie, Schindler's List, that Ray Fiennes should have won for Best Actor. Best Supporting Actor, rather. Best Actor, Liam Neeson was nominated. I think now Liam Neeson probably should have won, but they gave it to Tom Hanks for Philadelphia. Why? Exact same shallow Academy rules.
He was due.
No. This was like, oh, this comedic actor, which is what he was known for,
At the time, really? Yeah.
Yeah, he was like kind of, because he was on like Bosom Buddies, which is basically Three's Company.
Okay.
Where it's like these two guys, their apartment gets condemned, they move into an all women's hotel or whatever, dressing up as women in drag. That's what it's about, and it's a comedy. Apparently, it's like funny.
It's just sitting there waiting for somebody to find it.
Yeah.
Now,
so this was him being serious, and it was like about a serious subject made from the director of Silence of the Lambs. So it was like absolutely Oscar bait. Stars Denzel Washington, and it's kind of dated.
Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. And I'd watch the movie, and it's like the makeup and the subject matter and the direction pretty much do most of the work for him. Like he's.
Wait, did you say Tom Hanks?
Yeah, he won Best Actor for Philadelphia, and then
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, in Philadelphia. Are we?
No, it was Denzel and Tim Robbins.
No, it was Denzel and Tom Hanks. Now you're making the argument that Tom Hanks really should have won because he was the lead in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Why do you think it was Tim Robbins?
Because Shawshank Redemption came out that year.
Oh.
Yeah, and
I think you're right. Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
Philadelphia,
the
city.
Yeah, that might have been the. It might have been the year before because I.
Oh, was Tom Hanks? Oh, geez.
Confused 93 and 94, but yeah, Tom Hanks has an amazing Oscar speech when he does win, where he's like, the streets are still too crowded with angels to blah blah blah. Like, watch the speech.
Okay, send it to me.
Yeah, it is one of the great Oscar speeches. Tom Hanks, famously great orator.
Okay, let's wrap this up.
Yeah. So adapted screenplay, no, it's not going to win. But like, because this is probably going to be the last pod, at least me and you do before the Academy Awards.
Gotcha.
That like, I think like picture Oppenheimer is going to win. Director Christopher Nolan is going to win. Actor, I'd like Paul Giamatti to win. I think people are going to give it to Cillian Murphy. I don't... Because it's like the whole industry respect. Like, oh, he's been a background actor who's, like, underappreciated. And then somehow, like...
He's due.
Yeah, exactly.
He's due.
Somebody said that's legitimately what it's always about. It's never about who's good. It's about whose time it is to win.
His turn.
Yeah. So, like, I'd like for Paul Giamatti. They might give it to Cillian Murphy. Best Actress, I mean... Our last one, I actually mentioned all of these names before we even knew what the Academy Awards were. And I said Lily Gladstone, so I'll still go with that. They could go with Annette Bening from Naiad. Have you seen that?
No.
The biopic about the woman who swims across Florida Keys. Annette Bening, this is her 6th nomination or 5th nomination. You know, she's due.
She do?
Yeah. Or they could give it to Lily Gladstone, because honestly, it's probably the most important... it's like the most important character of the ones that are nominated, because like Barbie's not nominated, so like Indian reservation woman, to be politically incorrect and call her Indian, even though she's an Osage native, like that would make Oscar voters feel good.
Right.
Sandra Hüller, although like the year from The Favorite where Olivia Colman won, and it was against like Glenn Close or Lady Gaga,
Mm-hmm.
and then this woman came out of nowhere. If she won from Anatomy of a Fall, I'd be like cool because the other option is Emma Stone from Poor Things.
Is the dog from Anatomy of a Fall nominated for
That
anything?
people keep joking semi-seriously that it's like they should have a best animal one because next year they added a category, best casting. That's going to be a brand new category that's going to start next year.
Really?
Yeah.
You get an award for casting?
There's
a
department head. It's the only department head that does not have a category named after itself. And the funny thing is, there's like 5 casting directors in Hollywood, so it's like, oh, and the winner is Ellen Lewis again, But it's kind of like, if you think about it, like, I mean, they'll never nominate a movie like Jumanji, which, if you think about it, has an excellent cast, or like Shrek has an excellent cast. People will just tack it onto like Oppenheimer. Most amount of famous people.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. And then just clearing the rest of these. Davine Joy Randolph is going to win for The Holdovers. That's probably the best supporting actor performance. Mark Ruffalo, would have loved for him to win. I'd love for Ryan Gosling to win. Robert Downey Jr. is going to win because it's like, oh, what a comeback narrative, for that cements his status from being drug-addled and jailed in the 90s. Yeah, and it's just so lame, Hollywood. So original screenplay, I mean, I'd like for The Holdovers or Anatomy of a Fall could actually win in that one. It has a solid screenplay, but I'm not too impressed by any of them. Adapted, I feel, if any, I know a lot of people think it softens the edges, but American Fiction should win. It was made to be adapted. And then international feature, the only other famous one that I've seen is Society of the Snow, which is about the plane crash in the Andes, and it's okay, but we all know Zone is walking away from it. Do you have any points to make on Oscars?
You know all that.
I'm just exhausting.
No, it's okay.
No,
it's getting late.
Yeah. Oh shoot, it's 11:22. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, we'll leave it at that for the Film Gamer podcast, and we'll see you next time at the movies, I guess.
On top of the Wani.
Oh, the Wani?
The Wani.
Oh, yeah. A portable Blu-ray player. We'll watch Zone of Interest.
We'll watch the next,
on portable interest. Yeah, I did watch my favorite movie on a portable DVD player, though.
Memento.
Yeah. I've mentioned it 58,000 times. Yeah. Anyway, toodles.